It was supposed to be a quiet Christmas Eve in Dayton. Snow was falling steady, softening the roofs and driveways along our cul-de-sac. The kind of scene that makes you forget people can be cruel. I showed up at my son's house with a bottle of bourbon and a gift I'd spent weeks making, a wooden crib for his unborn daughter. Handcrafted. Oak. Polished like glass. I thought it might remind him of who he came from, the man who built things with his hands, not credit cards. Tyler opened the door, still wearing his tailored blazer. He didn't smile. Behind him, Kelsey stood in the hallway, glass of wine in hand, her lips curved into something between pity and amusement. "Dad," he said flatly, not moving aside. "We talked about this. You shouldn't have come." I blinked, confused. "It's Christmas, son," he sighed, the kind of exaggerated sigh people use when they think they're more evolved than you. "This isn't working anymore. You showing up like some—" He hesitated, eyes darting toward Kelsey. "Some charity case. You make everyone uncomfortable." I laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because my brain refused to accept what I was hearing. "Tyler, it's family dinner. I'm your father." His tone sharpened. "You were my father. You're toxic, Dad. You never respected boundaries. You always made me feel guilty for wanting more." Proft in the Krift. Behind him, Kelsey smirked. "It's time you learned to let go, Mr. Hayes," she said, voice sweet like venom. I stared at them both, my son, my daughter-in-law, people I'd given everything to. Mortgage payments, tuition, wedding costs. I'd even added Tyler's name to one of my bank accounts when he was starting out, to help him manage the bills. The same account he drained last year without telling me. But this was different. I looked at the doorframe, then at his hand gripping the knob, knuckles white. "Are you locking me out?" He hesitated only for a second before twisting the deadbolt. "Yeah," he said. "We don't want any drama tonight." I heard the click. The sound was final, surgical. For a second, I stood there, frozen on the porch as the cold air cut through my jacket. Inside, laughter bubbled, not mine, not ours, just theirs. Then I saw Kelsey lean over his shoulder and whisper something. They both laughed harder. That's when something inside me, whatever soft part still believed blood meant loyalty, cracked clean through. I didn't yell, didn't bang the door. I just said quietly, "Merry Christmas, son," and walked away. My boots crunched against the snow as I crossed the driveway. The bourbon bottle swung in my hand, heavy, useless. The streetlights threw long shadows across the yard. That's when I noticed my mailbox. Bent forward, door hanging open, metal gouged like it had been hit with a bat. Not random, too precise. The little brass plate with my name, Hayes, had been peeled halfway off. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a family argument. It was a message. The box wasn't the only thing they wanted destroyed. I brushed the snow off the metal, my fingers numb from the cold. Inside was a crumpled envelope, my own handwriting. The Christmas card I'd mailed to Tyler a week ago. Stamped "Return to Sender." That one small detail hit harder than any door slam. I stood there for a long moment, holding the torn envelope, feeling the quiet humiliation bleed into something sharper, something cleaner. For years, I'd excused their behavior, called it stress, ambition, the new generation. I'd told myself I was being understanding. That's what good dads do. But standing there in the snow, staring at that broken mailbox, I finally asked myself, have I been enabling their cruelty all this time by being too forgiving? That night, for the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake, and I knew one thing with absolute clarity. If they wanted a lesson in boundaries, they were about to get one. Would you like me to continue with part 2? Cracks in the frame, shame and class. Keeping this same tone and pacing. The morning after Christmas felt like waking up from anesthesia. My body was moving, but everything inside me was still numb. The smell of sawdust lingered in my garage, even though I hadn't built anything in months. I used to find comfort there, surrounded by the tools that paid for every meal, every mortgage payment, every semester of my son's college. Now they just stared back at me, silent witnesses to how far I'd fallen in his eyes. You know, I used to think pride was something you could pass down, like a family heirloom. My father taught me that honest work, even when it breaks your back, builds a kind of quiet dignity no one can take away. I tried to give that same belief to Tyler. For a while, it worked. When he was 10, he'd stand beside me while I sanded down old furniture, his tiny hands trying to copy mine. He'd grin every time I let him hammer a nail straight. "We build stuff, Dad," he'd say proudly. "We make things last." Somewhere along the way, he stopped saying that. I can't pinpoint exactly when. Maybe it was the first time he saw Kelsey's family's house, the marble floors, the chandelier that probably cost more than my entire pension. Or maybe it started earlier, when I told him he couldn't have the newest iPhone because I was still paying off the truck loan that got me to work every day. At first, his resentment came in small doses. "You don't understand business, Dad," he'd say. "Things are different now." I laughed it off. "Kids grow up, right? They want more than you had. That's natural." But it shifted. One day, he showed up wearing a Rolex, not a knockoff, the real thing, and I joked, "Did you win the lottery?" He didn't even smile. "It's called investing in yourself," he said. "You wouldn't get it." That hurt more than I expected. When he and Kelsey got engaged, I was happy for him. She was polished, confident, came from money, the kind of woman who orders wine by the vineyard, not the glass. But I noticed the first cracks the night I took them out for dinner to celebrate. I wore my best shirt flannel, clean, pressed, and halfway through the meal, Kelsey looked at my hands. "They're rough," she said with that polite disgust people use when they pretend they're joking. "You must really work hard." Tyler laughed. "Yeah, that's Dad for you. He's old school." Old school. I heard it like an insult. After they married, Kelsey's influence spread through him like mold under fresh paint. Suddenly, everything about me embarrassed him. My house, my truck, even the way I spoke. Once, he told me not to visit their home when they were hosting Kelsey's family. "It's just better if we keep appearances," he said. "They don't really get your lifestyle." My lifestyle. That was a new word for poverty, apparently. I started noticing how his tone changed around me, clipped, dismissive. He'd talk about diversifying assets and property management as if he'd forgotten the years I worked 2 shifts so he could have textbooks. He'd tell me, "You should have invested in stocks, not sweat." He even mentioned rewriting his will someday, to make sure my future kids are protected from bad financial habits. Bad financial habits. I hadn't realized living within your means was one. The worst part? I didn't fight back. I just nodded, tried to understand, tried to keep peace. That's what I told myself. But looking back, maybe I was just afraid of losing him completely. I thought if I stayed patient, if I showed unconditional love, he'd remember who he was. But all my silence did was teach him that disrespect had no consequences. People talk about toxic parents all the time, and sure, they exist. But no one talks about toxic children, the ones who gaslight you into thinking you failed them just because you didn't hand them the world wrapped in gold. By the time last Christmas came around, I'd been walking on eggshells for years. Every phone call, every visit, I'd rehearse what to say, what not to say. Don't mention work. Don't ask about money. Don't bring up how you paid for that MBA he never thanked you for. That night at his doorstep wasn't just another argument. It was the finale of a slow betrayal that had been rehearsing itself for a decade. And somewhere deep down, I think Tyler knew it too. He didn't lock that door out of anger. He did it out of shame, the kind that eats you alive when you realize you've traded love for approval. I sat alone in my kitchen that night, staring at the mug I'd made him for Father's Day 10 years ago. Like father, like son. The letters were faded now, like the bond that used to make them true. I used to believe that love could fix anything. Now I knew better. Love without respect isn't love. It's just dependency dressed up as forgiveness. And I'd had enough of forgiving. Would you like me to continue with part 3? The apology call, and the hot mic in the same voice and emotional rhythm. 2 days after Christmas, I was still pretending the world made sense. The snow outside had crusted into a thin sheet of ice. And every time I looked out the window, that crooked mailbox reminded me of how fragile family could be. I'd told myself not to expect anything. But when my phone rang that morning, and I saw Tyler's name flash across the screen, my stomach twisted. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "Hey, Dad." His voice was soft. Too soft. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd realized what he'd done. "Tyler," I said, cautious. "Didn't expect to hear from you." "I know," he replied quickly, like he'd rehearsed the words. "Listen, I've been thinking about what happened." I overreacted. I said things I didn't mean. There was something about his tone, smooth, deliberate, that didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like strategy. He kept talking. "Kelsey and I would really like to make it up to you. Come to dinner tomorrow night. Our house. 6 o'clock. Just family, you know. A chance to start over. I hesitated. You sure that's a good idea? Of course, he said. Kelsey's cooking her famous roast. It'll be great. And maybe wear that nice suit you had for Mom's funeral. First impressions matter. You know how people can be. That line froze me. First impressions matter. Who was I supposed to impress? But before I could answer, I heard muffled voices on his end. A laugh. A whisper. Then, faint but clear, her voice. Did he buy it? Kelsey. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Tyler chuckled. Oh yeah. He's pathetic enough to believe anything. You should have heard him. Sounded relieved. A pause. Then Kelsey again, sharp, amused. Perfect. Dad's bringing the investors tomorrow. The contrast will be delicious. Old, broke builder versus successful son-in-law. Peter's gonna eat that up. All. My ears started ringing. My grip on the phone tightened until my hand went numb. Then Tyler, laughing quietly. By the end of the night, he'll see what a real family looks like. Ours. Not his. There it was, the plan. Not an olive branch. A setup. They weren't inviting me to make peace. They were staging a performance, a humiliation dinner, for sport and status. I should have hung up, but I couldn't. I needed to hear it. Kelsey's voice dropped to a whisper. Just make sure he looks pathetic enough. That suit is perfect, old, dated, cheap. It'll drive the point home. Then a muffled sound, maybe her kissing him. This guarantees your spot in Dad's will, she murmured. My heart felt like it cracked in half. I heard the faint sound of a wine glass clinking. And then finally the call ended. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the quiet phone in my hand. The humiliation didn't even sting this time. It felt colder. Cleaner. It's strange how betrayal changes shape once you see it for what it really is. It stops being pain and turns into clarity. They thought they were clever, that they could use my love for them as a prop, my forgiveness as ammunition. They mistook kindness for weakness, but I wasn't weak. Not anymore. I opened the drawer by my desk and took out a stack of old papers, financial records, property documents, copies of my will. I'd kept them all, updated, notarized. Every dollar, every signature in black and white. I'd even included a clause years ago about disinheriting anyone proven to act in bad faith. I'd written that line after my wife passed. She used to say, "Protect the family, even from itself." Back then, I thought she meant emotionally. Now, I realized she meant legally. I slid the papers aside until I found what I was looking for, a small white business card. Richard Langford, Langford Commercial Holdings, Kelsey's father. He'd given it to me once at a dinner, back when things were still civil. "Call any time, Mark," he'd said. "Always good to know honest men." Honest men, I smiled bitterly. They wanted a show tomorrow night? Fine. I'd give them one. But this time, I wouldn't be the fool on stage. As I put the phone down, my reflection caught in the window. Older, steadier, sharper. For years I'd believed my silence kept the peace. Now I understood silence was just permission dressed as patience. Tomorrow, that ended. They wanted to humiliate me in front of their world? I'd show them what happens when the man they underestimated stops apologizing. And I already knew exactly who to call. Would you like me to continue with part 4? Drawing the line, the call to Richard. Keeping this same cinematic pacing and emotional depth. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their laughter echoing through the phone. Kelsey's smug little giggle, Tyler's cruel tone, when he called me pathetic. It looped in my head like bad radio static, impossible to shut off. At 3 a.m., I found myself in the garage again, running my hand across the cold metal of my workbench. The scent of oil, the faint hum of the old space heater, it grounded me. My father used to say, "When people disrespect you, don't shout, build something instead. Build your way back to calm." So I did. Not furniture this time. A plan. For years, I'd let them gaslight me, make me believe I was the problem, that my old school ways embarrassed them. I'd convinced myself that being patient made me a good father. But standing there, I realized something I should have seen long ago. I hadn't been patient. I'd been complicit. That word hit me like a hammer. Complicit. Every time I'd smiled through an insult, every time I'd ignored a cruel joke for the sake of family harmony, I'd handed them permission to keep doing it. Not anymore. When dawn finally broke over Dayton, the light looked different, sharper, cleaner. I made coffee, sat by the window, and stared at that battered mailbox, still leaning sideways in the snow. It looked pathetic, yes, but it was also still standing. Bent, scarred, but standing. I could relate. That was when I remembered the card, Richard Langford's business card. I'd almost thrown it away after the wedding. He was the kind of man who made small talk about property values while ignoring the waitstaff, and I figured I'd never have a reason to call him. But now, maybe I did. If what Kelsey said was true, Richard had no idea what his daughter and my son were planning. He was being used, too, as a prop, as validation for their cruelty, and something told me a man like Richard wouldn't appreciate being manipulated, especially by his own child. I dug the card out of my filing drawer. The number was embossed, the kind of detail people pay extra for just to feel important. Langford Commercial Holdings. Underneath his name were the words, integrity, legacy, growth. I had to laugh at the irony. I sat there, staring at my phone for a full minute. I rehearsed a dozen versions of what I wanted to say, and every single one sounded either too desperate or too angry. Finally, I decided to just be honest. When he answered, his voice was crisp, alert, the kind of man who's already on his second espresso by 8 a.m. Richard Langford speaking. Mr. Langford, it's Mark Hayes, Tyler's father. A pause. Oh, good morning, Mark. Everything all right? I took a breath. Not really. I know this is uncomfortable, but I need to tell you something that's going to happen tonight, and you deserve to know before it does. He didn't interrupt. That was a good sign. So I told him. I told him about the call, about the laughter, about the way his daughter had used him as bait for a dinner that was never meant to reconcile anything. I told him word for word what I'd heard, the part about the contrast will be delicious, and how they planned to show me off like a charity case to impress him and his investors. When I finished, the line went silent. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the faint hum of static. Then Richard spoke, low and deliberate. Are you absolutely sure about this? I wish I wasn't. He exhaled, long and heavy. That's disturbing, but not unbelievable. I've had concerns about Kelsey's sense of entitlement for a while now. She's been different lately. Arrogant. He paused again. Then his tone shifted, less business, more human. Thank you for telling me, Mark. Most men wouldn't have had the decency. What are you planning to do? I'm not planning revenge, I said quietly. I just want truth. I want everyone in that room to see them for who they are. Richard chuckled. But it wasn't amusement, it was disbelief, mixed with respect. You know, I built my company on one rule. You never manipulate the man who tells you the truth. It always comes back to bite you. Then his voice softened. I think I can help you with this. Leave the dinner arrangements as they are. I'll handle my side. Handle how? You'll see, he said simply. Let's just say it's time for a few lessons in humility. When the call ended, I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not fear, just focus. For the first time in years, I felt like the man I used to be. The one who fixed things that were broken. I looked out at the snow again, the wind scraping against that mangled mailbox, and I whispered, mostly to myself, you wanted to play power games, Tyler. Fine. But you forgot where I learned mine. When you hit a certain age, you stop expecting allies. You get used to fighting your battles alone, one insurance form, one overdue bill, one betrayal at a time. So when Richard Langford called me back that same afternoon and said, Mark, I want you to meet someone. I didn't know what to expect. Her name was Olivia Chen, a corporate attorney, mid-30s, sharp eyes that missed nothing. The kind of person who could find a loophole in a locked safe. We met at a small coffee shop near downtown Dayton. I still smelled like sawdust. She still looked like she'd just come from a deposition. No nonsense, no small talk, just straight to the point. Mr. Hayes, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Richard briefed me. You're about to walk into something ugly. I figured that out, I said, forcing a laugh. She nodded once, opening her laptop. Let's go over what you know. Everything: dates, conversations, witnesses, property damage, written proof if any. I handed her a small folder. Inside were printouts of text messages, screenshots of bank transfers Tyler had made from our shared account years ago, and a photo of my vandalized mailbox. She flipped through the pages quickly, efficient as a machine. This is good, she said. Really good. You've kept records. Habit, I replied. I spent 40 years managing projects. Paperwork keeps the world honest. She smiled faintly. That's a builder's mindset and a lawyer's dream. Then she looked up, eyes narrowing. You understand that what they did, the fake invitation, the setup, the intimidation technically qualifies as intentional emotional distress. It's not a felony, but it's evidence of malice. And that matters. I blinked. Malice? Yes, she said. In court, malice changes everything. It means they acted not just out of selfishness but with the intent to humiliate. That makes people like jurors, or in this case, Richard, see the truth faster. I sipped my coffee, the bitter taste grounding me. I'm not trying to sue them, I said. I just want them to face themselves. That's what makes you dangerous, she said calmly. People who want justice are predictable. People who want truth are not. There was a pause, the kind that stretches long enough to make you wonder if you're being studied. Then she leaned forward, lowering her voice. Richard wants this exposed, she said, but we need to make it happen cleanly. No shouting, no drama. Let them reveal themselves. You just stay calm, stay consistent. The minute you lose your temper, they win. And the Radjoded is not absent safe seared. I nodded. That's always been my weakness. I hold it in until it explodes. Then don't explode, she said simply. Outsmart them instead. That line stuck with me. Outsmart them instead. We spent the next hour outlining what she called soft containment. I'd attend the dinner exactly as invited. I'd dress as they asked, the old navy suit, the one that probably looked a decade out of style. I'd be polite, composed, grateful even. I'd let them think I was walking into their trap blind. Meanwhile, Richard would coordinate on his end. He'd invite his business partners, men and women who prided themselves on integrity, to witness the family reunion. Olivia would attend, quietly, as his legal counsel. No one would question why she was there. Big deals always came with lawyers attached, and when the performance began, when Tyler and Kelsey tried to use me as the punchline of their social theater, Richard would intervene. But not out of anger, out of principle, publicly, decisively, in a way that would make every smug smile in that room turn to ash. I remember asking her, what if it backfires? What if they twist it again? Olivia smiled, small and knowing. Then we adjust. We always have options. The key is to keep them underestimating you. Arrogance is predictable. Humility isn't. Conde, when the meeting ended, she stood and offered her hand. You remind me of my father, she said softly. He used to say, you can't teach integrity, but you can expose the lack of it. I thanked her and left the cafe, the cold wind biting my face. The streets were quiet. Post-holiday calm. I stopped at a red light and looked at my reflection in the shop window, tired, older, but not broken. For the first time in years, I felt something like partnership. Not pity, not rescue partnership. On the way home, I called Richard. She's good, I said. I told you, he replied. She doesn't lose. As I hung up, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming my narrative, the one they'd twisted into shame and silence. They'd spent years treating me like an outdated relic, a reminder of the version of themselves they wanted to bury. But now, they'd be forced to see the man who built everything they took for granted. Olivia's words replayed in my mind as I pulled into my driveway. Don't explode. Outsmart them instead. So that's exactly what I planned to do. The next 24 hours felt like the longest day of my life. Every hour ticked by heavy with purpose, not fear, not anticipation, just focus. When you've spent decades managing construction sites, you learn one thing. Every strong structure needs a backup plan. Olivia called it strategic foresight. I called it Plan B. That morning, I started preparing my house as if it were a project site again. The table I'd built for my late wife, solid oak, 6 feet long, was polished until it gleamed. I pulled the good china out of the cabinet, the set we'd only used for anniversaries. 8 plates, 8 wine glasses. I didn't know who would be sitting there yet, but deep down, I had a feeling the chairs would be full. The turkey went into the oven by noon. Mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread, apple pie. My kitchen looked like Thanksgiving had decided to crash Christmas week. Cooking always slowed my heartbeat. Every cut, every stir was measured, predictable. It was the opposite of the chaos my son had turned our lives into. By 3 p.m., Olivia called to confirm the logistics. Everything's set on our end, she said. Richard invited his business partners, people Tyler and Kelsey will want to impress. You show up, act natural, and let the night unfold. When Richard gives you the signal, you leave. Quietly. Then what? I asked. Then you wait for the exodus. She replied, her tone calm and surgical. Her confidence steadied me. I'd spent my whole life solving problems with my hands, fixing broken beams, sealing cracks, tightening bolts. This time, I was fixing something invisible. My dignity. Before I got dressed, I walked outside to the mailbox. The dents glinted in the weak Ohio sunlight, almost like scars. I decided not to fix it yet, let it stay that way. I thought, a reminder of where this all started. Boundaries don't always have to be rebuilt. Sometimes, they just need to be respected. At 5 p.m., I showered, shaved, and put on that old Navy suit, the one Tyler said would make me look pathetic enough. Funny thing, it still fit. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar from the closet. I tightened my tie and looked at my reflection. Older, yes, but the kind of old that carries quiet authority. As I drove toward the Langford estate, the sky turned violet over the snow-covered fields. My hand stayed steady on the wheel. Olivia's voice echoed in my head. Stay calm. Let arrogance expose itself. The house came into view like a postcard, manicured hedges, warm golden lights spilling from tall windows, valet parking. I could already picture Kelsey's perfect smile hiding daggers. Tyler's voice rehearsed to sound superior. They thought this was their big moment, their social performance to prove they'd outgrown me. They had no idea they'd already lost control of the narrative. When I arrived, Richard's black Mercedes was parked in the front drive. That was part of the plan, a visible symbol of his authority. Inside, his investors were already gathered, unaware that tonight's family dinner was about to become an ethics seminar in real time. I stepped out of the car, adjusted my jacket, and whispered to myself, "You've built foundations that lasted 40 years, Mark. Tonight, you build one more." Before walking up to the door, I texted Olivia. "In position." She replied instantly. "Good. Remember, you're not walking into their house. You're walking into your own lesson." Inside my chest, the fear finally started to melt into something colder: control. I wasn't a father begging for respect anymore. I was a man reclaiming it. I thought about all those years of bending over backward, helping with down payments, wiring money, temporarily, biting my tongue when Tyler treated me like an outdated version of himself. Every compromise had been a brick in the prison I'd built with my own kindness. Tonight, I was breaking it down, one act of calm defiance at a time. The plan was simple but elegant. I'd play my role exactly as they scripted it. The humble, outdated father, grateful to be included. I'd let them bask in their cruelty. Let every cutting remark echo through the room because Richard would be there to hear it too. Then, when the show reached its peak, when they delivered their big, final insult, he'd rise, and instead of applause, they'd get judgment. The kind of judgment money can't buy off. Back home, my house waited, table set, lights warm, food ready. Plan B wasn't just a meal. It was redemption, waiting quietly, for the right moment. I took one last deep breath, staring at that grand doorway. "Time to clock in," I murmured. "Let's get to work." When I pulled into the Langford driveway, the world looked like it had been dipped in gold. The lights on the massive stone facade glowed against the snow, and a valet in a black coat opened my car door before I even turned off the engine. I thanked him, even though he didn't meet my eyes. People like that rarely look long at men who arrive in Hondas. Inside, laughter spilled from the dining room, that crisp, expensive kind of laughter that fills the air right before someone gets humiliated. I could smell the roast, the wine, the polished wood. For a moment, I wondered how many times Tyler had told people his father was a builder, the way you'd mention a childhood allergy. When I stepped into the foyer, my son was waiting for me. Tyler. Tailored suit, slick hair, fake charm. I could almost see the arrogance radiating off him like cologne. "Well, look who showed up," he said, smiling for the benefit of his audience. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come, Dad. Under the proven raisons, I keep my word," I replied, my voice steady. He nodded, clearly rehearsed. "Good. We've got some important people here tonight. Investors, people who appreciate success stories." His eyes flicked over my old Navy suit, the one he'd mocked. "Try not to make this about the past, okay? Wouldn't dream of it." Kelsey appeared beside him like a shadow, perfectly dressed, perfectly cruel. "Mr. Hayes," she said, air kissing the air near my cheek. "So brave of you to join us after everything." "Brave?" I asked softly. "Oh, you know," she said, sipping her champagne. "After all the misunderstandings, we all say things we regret." I would just fold a nade charge into the sitter. Behind them, I saw Richard Langford near the head of the long dining table, speaking quietly with Olivia and a few of his business partners. They looked calm, detached, observers waiting for the play to begin. Tyler gestured toward the table. "Come on in, let's eat." As I walked in, the conversation quieted just slightly, that subtle shift you feel when someone's being evaluated. I took my seat at the far end, opposite Richard. Kelsey sat directly across from me, her smile thin and victorious. For a while, everything was polite. Forks clinked, glasses touched. Tyler bragged about his new ventures, dropping buzzwords he barely understood: capital diversification, vertical scaling, legacy planning. Kelsey laughed too loudly at every sentence, her laughter bouncing off the marble walls like glass breaking. Then came the first jab. "So, Dad," Tyler said casually, swirling his wine, "still working on those woodworking projects?" I looked at him, calm. "Retired now, but I still fix a few things here and there. Keeps me grounded." "Grounded," he repeated with mock sympathy. "That's nice. Not everyone's built for the corporate world." Kelsey chimed in sweetly. "Tyler just means not everyone can handle pressure. He's been carrying a lot lately: family expectations, business, inheritance, planning." "Inheritance?" One of Richard's partners raised an eyebrow. Kelsey gave a delicate shrug. "Oh, you know how families are. Some of us just have more to live up to than others." The laughter that followed was light, controlled, but it cut deep. I could feel the blood rush in my ears. My hand tightened around the fork, then loosened. Olivia's earlier words echoed in my head. "Don't explode. Outsmart them instead." So I smiled. "That's true," I said. "Some people build things, others just inherit them." The comment landed quietly, like a nail hammered flush into wood. Tyler's smirk faltered for half a second. Richard cleared his throat. "Speaking of inheritance," he said, raising his glass, "I think tonight's a good time to talk about family values." The room went still. Everyone looked at him after all. When a man like Richard spoke, people listened. He stood, his expression composed but heavy. "I've built my company on loyalty and honesty, on recognizing the people who contribute, not the ones who manipulate." Tyler's confident grin wavered. Richard continued, "And tonight, I've been reminded that success means nothing without integrity. That some people, even those closest to us, forget that." Kelsey shifted uncomfortably. "Richard, maybe this isn't the time." He ignored her. "I've learned tonight that my daughter and her husband tried to use me, and someone I deeply respect, for their own advancement. To turn kindness into theater." Every eye in the room turned toward them. Tyler froze. "That's not true. We don't," Richard said sharply. "I heard it myself. Every word. The invitation, the mockery, the plan." Kelsey went pale. "You can't just—" "Oh, I can," Richard interrupted, his voice firm. "Because tonight, I choose to spend my Christmas with people who understand the difference between status and character." He lifted his glass higher. "To character." No one else moved. Then Olivia raised her glass. Then one partner. Then another. The sound of clinking crystal filled the silence like a verdict. I stayed seated, quiet, watching my son's expression crumble. The performance he'd built his identity around had collapsed mid-scene. The audience was leaving, literally. One by one, Richard's guests began excusing themselves politely. "Thank you for dinner, but we should be going." Within minutes, the grand dining room emptied. The laughter died. The chandeliers still glowed, but the warmth was gone. Tyler looked around, his voice shaking. "Wait, where's everyone going?" Richard set his glass down with finality. "They're following integrity, son. Something you might want to try someday. Note if accepted ni diri." As the guests filed out, I stood and buttoned my jacket. Tyler looked at me with a mix of confusion and fear. "Dad," he said quietly. "What did you do?" I met his eyes, not angry, not triumphant, just steady. I didn't do anything, Tyler. I just told the truth to the right person. Then I turned, leaving him standing in the ruins of his own arrogance. Outside, the night was cold and still. My breath fogged in the air, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel heavy. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just walks away calm, certain, and leaving silence behind it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the night had turned quiet again, that strange kind of quiet that follows a storm. Snow was still falling, thin and steady, softening the edges of everything it touched. I left my car running for a moment, letting the engine hum fill the air, while I stared at the small house that had raised a son, buried a wife, and survived every winter life through its way. Then I saw the headlights, a whole line of them, turning into my street one after another. Black sedans, a silver Mercedes, a couple of SUVs, cars that didn't belong here, not among the modest porches and cracked driveways of our neighborhood. Richard was the first to step out, his long coat brushing against the snow. Olivia followed, holding her tablet under one arm. Behind them came two of Richard's business partners and their wives, the same ones who had just walked out of Tyler's mansion 20 minutes earlier. "Mark," Richard said as he approached me, his voice warm despite the cold. "I believe this is where the real dinner was supposed to be." I laughed quietly, a sound somewhere between disbelief and relief. "You're serious? I haven't been this serious in years," he said. So I opened my door, and they followed me inside. The heat from the furnace greeted us first, carrying the smell of roasted turkey, sage, and apple pie. My home wasn't much a two-bedroom place built in the 70s, but that night, under the soft glow of the Christmas lights I'd strung up for no one but myself, it felt alive again. "Good God," one of the partners murmured as he stepped in. "This smells incredible." "Please," I said, motioning to the dining table. "Make yourselves comfortable. I wasn't expecting guests, but there's plenty to go around." Olivia helped me bring dishes from the kitchen, moving with that efficient calm of someone who knew when to step in without making it awkward. Richard poured wine into mismatched glasses, the expensive red swirling inside dollar store stems. Somehow, that contrast felt perfect. When everyone had found their seats, I took a moment just to look around. The same oak table I'd built 30 years ago now held a room full of strangers, and yet, it didn't feel strange at all. The conversation flowed easily, without pretense or performance. One of the partners, a tall man named Frank, smiled across the table. "You know, Mark, I've been to hundreds of dinners like the one earlier tonight. Perfect lighting, perfect music, and not a single ounce of sincerity. This," he gestured to the table, to the food, to the laughter already building. "This feels real." Richard nodded. "That's because it is. You can't fake authenticity. So there's Alwyn." For the first time that evening, I felt something inside me unclench. The years of trying to prove I was worth respect, they started to fade like smoke. These people didn't see a failure or a relic. They saw a man who had survived with his dignity intact. We talked about work, about family, about how the definition of success changes when you stop needing applause. Someone complimented my apple pie, and I told them the recipe was my late wife's. That part hit me unexpectedly hard, but the warmth around the table made the ache bearable. At one point, Richard lifted his glass. "I'd like to make something clear before the night goes on," he said. His tone was calm but carried authority, the kind of voice that could still a room. "Effective immediately, Tyler is out of all Langford business interests, and as for Kelsey, her share of the inheritance will be reduced to exactly what she brought into the marriage. Nothing more." Olivia looked up from her glass but said nothing. She didn't have to. I opened my mouth to protest, but Richard raised a hand. "Don't," he said gently. "You didn't cause this, Mark. You just revealed it." The truth was already there, waiting for light. It was strange, hearing someone defend me after all these years. I didn't know whether to thank him or just sit quietly and let it sink in. So I chose the latter. After dinner, people lingered. No one wanted to leave. Frank and his wife helped clear the table. Olivia insisted on washing the dishes, and Richard brought out his phone to show me pictures of his grandchildren. For a man who lived his life in boardrooms and balance sheets, he suddenly looked very human. "Mark," he said, his voice softer now, "I owe you an apology, not just for what happened tonight, but for not seeing it sooner. I thought my daughter was driven. I didn't realize she was lost." I shook my head. "You don't have to apologize. Family blinds all of us sometimes." He smiled, tired but genuine. Then maybe this is a chance for both our families to start again differently this time. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the street in white. Through the window, I could see my battered mailbox, still leaning sideways under the porch light. It looked pitiful and proud all at once, a survivor. Just like me. I raised my glass. To family, I said. Not the one we're born into, but the one we choose. The people who stand with you when the rest walk away. Everyone lifted their glasses. The sound of clinking filled the room, gentle and true. As the night went on, the laughter grew easier, deeper. My home, once filled with silence and regret, now buzzed with warmth. I realized then that I hadn't lost a son that evening. I'd simply made room for better people to call family. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt rich. Not in the way my son chased, not with dollars or inheritance, but with peace. It must have been close to midnight when I heard the engines outside. 2 cars screeching to a stop, doors slamming hard enough to echo down the block. The laughter around the table froze. For a second, no one spoke. Then came the pounding on the front door. "Open up, Dad." Even without looking, I knew that voice. "Tyler." Richard set down his wine glass and gave me a quiet nod. Olivia's eyes met mine, calm, steady, unreadable. I stood up and opened the door. Tyler stormed in first, his face red, his tie hanging loose, followed by Kelsey, mascara streaking down her cheeks. They looked wild, desperate people who'd just watched their little empire crumble. "How dare you?" Tyler shouted, pointing at me as if I were the thief. "You stole our guests. You humiliated us in front of everyone." Behind him, Kelsey's voice cracked. "You turned them against us with your pathetic sob story. You played the victim to make us look like monsters." I didn't answer right away. The others at the table sat frozen, unsure if they should leave or stay. The smell of pie and roasted turkey still hung in the air, absurdly gentle against the tension. Finally, I said, "Sit down, both of you." Tyler's mouth twisted. "Don't talk to me like I'm a kid. You've done enough." Richard rose from his chair, his voice quiet but razor sharp. Enough is exactly the word I'd use, too. When he spoke, it wasn't as a businessman or a father-in-law. It was as a man betrayed by the very people who shared his name. "Tyler, Kelsey," he said slowly, "what you did tonight was cruel, deliberate, and beneath you, or at least beneath the people I thought you were. You used my trust and your father's love to stage a performance of superiority. For what? Approval? Money?" Kelsey burst into tears. "Dad, please." But he didn't waver. "You wanted my investors to see a poor, outdated man as a joke, just so you could look bigger. Instead, they saw exactly what kind of people you are, and believe me, they won't forget it." Tyler tried to recover his composure, forcing a smirk that came off brittle. "You don't understand. He's been manipulating you, playing innocent. This," he gestured at me, at the table, at the guests. "This is all an act." Olivia finally stood, closing her laptop with a soft click that somehow cut louder than any shout. "An act?" she said calmly. "That's an interesting word. Coming from 2 people who rehearsed their cruelty like a script." Tyler blinked. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm the lawyer," she replied. "The one who helped make sure your script was recorded, documented, and witnessed by people with influence, including your father-in-law." The color drained from his face. Olivia looked at them both. "Every word you said on that call, the one where you laughed about humiliating him, is now evidence. You didn't just burn bridges tonight, you lit them with your own arrogance." Kelsey turned to Richard, shaking her head. "Daddy, please, she's twisting everything." Richard raised a hand. "Enough, Kelsey. You've twisted enough. Olivia didn't come here to play games. She came because I wanted the truth laid out, once and for all." That's when Tyler snapped. "This is your fault." He yelled at me, voice cracking. "You ruined everything. You couldn't just stay out of it." For years, that kind of outburst would have made me shrink, apologize, even. But not anymore. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You're right. I didn't stay out of it. I finally stood up for myself." He blinked, stunned by my calm. I kept going, my voice low but firm. "You've been treating me like I was the problem, like my love for you was some kind of weakness. But it wasn't weakness, it was patience. And I see now that patience without boundaries is just permission for people to keep hurting you." The words came out smoother than I expected, like they'd been waiting years to be spoken. For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the faint hum of the heater. Then Kelsey whispered, "You think you're so righteous, don't you? You think you're teaching us a lesson?" Olivia's voice broke the silence. "He's not teaching you a lesson. Life is." And then she added something I didn't expect, something that made everyone look at her. "I took this case because I've seen this before," she said softly. "My own mother spent 20 years apologizing to people who made her feel small, people who thought kindness was weakness. When she finally fought back, it was too late. I don't let it get that far anymore." For a second, her professional armor cracked not much, but enough for me to see the real reason behind her fierce composure. Richard nodded slowly, emotion flickering across his face. "Olivia, I think that's why you're good at what you do. You understand what loss really costs." Kelsey sank into a chair, defeated. Tyler just stood there, jaw tight, eyes darting between us like he was trying to find a script to follow that didn't exist anymore. "Finally," I said quietly, "you can go now. Both of you." Tyler's mouth opened as if to argue, but no words came. He looked at Richard one last time, maybe hoping for mercy. None came. He grabbed Kelsey's arm, and together they stumbled out into the cold. When the door shut, no one spoke for a while. The silence wasn't awkward. It was cleansing. Richard sat down, his shoulders heavy. "You handled that better than I would have." "I've had a lot of practice staying calm," I said. He nodded. And tonight, that calm made the difference. Olivia poured the last of the wine into my glass, her voice softer now. "You didn't just win tonight, Mark. You reclaimed yourself." I raised the glass and smiled faintly. "To boundaries," I said. "And to finally learning where they belong." I am Aiden. The morning after everything happened, the world felt unnaturally quiet. No calls, no shouting, no noise. Just the steady hum of the heater and the muffled sound of snow falling outside. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like loneliness, it felt like peace. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the sunrise creep across the roofs of my neighborhood. The sky was pale gold, the kind of color that makes everything seem possible again. My house still smelled faintly of turkey and cinnamon, remnants of the dinner that had changed everything. The table was still set, wine glasses half full, napkins folded like small victories. It hit me then. This home, this modest space I'd once felt ashamed of, had become the place where truth came to light, where lies fell apart and character stood its ground. I used to think strength meant providing money, support, sacrifice, but that morning, I realized real strength was knowing when to stop giving people the tools to hurt you. Olivia called around 9 a.m. "You holding up?" she asked. "Better than I should be," I said. She laughed softly. "That's how you know it's over. When the quiet doesn't scare you anymore." We talked for a while about the fallout, the press of consequence already catching up with Tyler and Kelsey. Richard had followed through, cutting Tyler off from every business tie and freezing Kelsey's inheritance accounts until the new will was signed. "Swift and clean," Olivia said. "That's how accountability works when you're not bluffing." I asked her if she'd ever seen a night like that before. "Once," she said. "But that time the father didn't show up. He was too scared. He died with the apology still unsaid." There was a pause. Then she added quietly, "You did what he couldn't." After the call, I sat there for a long time, letting those words sink in. For years, I'd thought I was the weak one, the doormat, the pushover, the dad too soft for the real world. But now, looking back, I saw something else. It wasn't weakness that kept me patient. It was love. And love, when paired with boundaries, becomes something far stronger than pride. That afternoon, Richard stopped by. No lawyers, no entourage, just him, holding a box of pastries and 2 steaming coffees. "I thought we could debrief," he said, setting the box down. "Plus, my doctor says I need to eat fewer croissants, so I'm sharing the guilt." We sat at the same table where everything had unfolded the night before. He looked around, shaking his head. "You know, I don't think I've felt this comfortable in a home in years. It's strange, the richer you get, the more you miss this kind of honesty." I smiled. "Honesty doesn't fit in marble kitchens, I guess." He chuckled. "No, it doesn't." We talked about the aftermath. Tyler had tried calling him 3 times that morning. Richard hadn't answered. "He needs to learn what silence feels like," he said. "Sometimes that's the only language arrogance understands." Then he looked at me seriously. "You taught me something last night, Mark. You reminded me that decency doesn't shout. It just stands there quietly until the noise burns itself out. That line stuck with me. Maybe that was the real victory, not revenge, not even justice, but clarity. The kind that comes when you finally see people for who they are, and yourself for who you've always been. After he left, I spent the rest of the day cleaning up, not out of obligation, but out of care. I washed the dishes, polished the table, folded the linens. Every action felt deliberate, grounding. The house wasn't just clean, it was reset. Late in the afternoon, as I was putting away the last of the plates, I noticed the old family photo still on the fridge. Me, Tyler, and my late wife, smiling on his graduation day. For a second, I almost reached to take it down. Then I didn't, because that version of us had existed. It was real once, and acknowledging the good doesn't erase the bad, it just proves you survived both. As evening fell, I stepped outside. The snow had stopped, leaving the world wrapped in quiet white. My mailbox, still bent from the night of the vandalism, stood under the streetlight like a battle-scarred soldier. For weeks, I'd planned to fix it. But as I looked at it now, I realized I didn't need to. Its dents told a story, a reminder that even things damaged by cruelty can still serve their purpose. Still stand, still hold messages worth reading. When I went back inside, I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat by the fireplace. The flames flickered low, calm, alive. I thought about everything Olivia had said about her mother, about learning not to let guilt masquerade as kindness. That had been my greatest mistake. Confusing silence for peace, compliance for love. But peace without truth isn't peace at all. It's surrender. Now I knew better. I wasn't the man my son said. I was the outdated worker clinging to pride. I was a man who'd built something real, even if it didn't shine like his world. And maybe that's why it lasted. Before going to bed, I sent one last text to Olivia. "Thank you for helping me see clearly." Her reply came a minute later. "You did that yourself, Mark. I just turned on the light." I set the phone down and looked around my quiet living room, the home I'd almost let shame steal from me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man trying to rebuild what he'd lost. I felt like a man who'd finally stopped apologizing for what he'd built. If there's one thing this entire ordeal taught me, it's that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's survival. For years, I thought keeping the peace meant saying yes, forgiving too easily, and pretending that cruelty was just family tension. I was wrong. The truth is, the longer you let toxic people rewrite your worth, the smaller your world becomes. Saying no doesn't make you cold, it makes you free. The biggest shift came the moment I stopped trying to earn respect from people who had none to give. I learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors that you control. You decide who walks through them, and when it's time to close them again. The silence that used to scare me now feels sacred. It's the sound of my mind healing. In the end, revenge wasn't what brought peace, clarity did. I didn't need to destroy anyone. I just needed to stop handing over my dignity like it was something negotiable. And funny enough, once I did, the world didn't collapse. It got quieter, kinder, honest. So, here's what I'll leave you with. You're not obligated to keep people in your life just because they share your last name. Family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by respect. Now I'm curious, what about you? Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family member or stand up to someone who thought they owned your kindness? How did you protect your peace without losing yourself in the process? Share your story below. Maybe someone who's still afraid to say enough will finally find the courage to do it after reading yours.